One day you look around and something that you were not prepared for start happening. The world around you as you knew it starts to change. Not all at once, one person at a time. Your parents die. Your peers, people your own age, the people that you thought would be part of your life story are not there anymore. What if grief and loss become part of your regular season of life? What if grief and loss become too familiar? How can we not only continue to live, but how do we live life to its fullest when people in our lives keep dying? The reality is that even though life takes from us those who we love, life still requires and demands that we show up for the next day, that we show up for ourselves and for those who remain. This discussion today is important because even though we keep losing loved ones, we have to find a way to cope with death and dying and grief. We have to, even as we get older, continue to live fearlessly.
Death is inevitable. How we navigate grief and loss is to a large degree optional and negotiable. We have chosen an optimistic but realistic approach. Like all the other chapters of our life, we intend to live it fully and on our own terms. Lifestyle choices, optimistic worldview, and faith are the foundation for a dynamic, purposeful, and meaningful life, even in old age. Relationships fuel the motivation to add life to our years, not just years to our lives.
In today's episode, we cover a topic that, to be honest with you, it's uncomfortable to talk about, but we must because death and grief is part of our lives, whether we have experienced it before or whether we're going through it now, or it's very likely that we will go through it in the future. So today's topic is how do we cope with grief and loss as we get older? As we age, we begin to notice the difficult reality that people in our lives gradually, some of them are no longer there. Parents passed away. And while this is part of the natural order of life, knowing that it's coming, knowing that and expecting it doesn't change the reality of the pain when it happens. When a parent pass away, you still suffer that and go through that sense of loss because the pain is real. And then something else happens. Then our siblings and people of our own age, they start dying also. People that have walked with you in different parts of your life, people that have gone through difficulties with you. I'm talking about our peers. These people start dying too. And when people who have been part of our lives for all these years, when they begin to disappear, our sense of stability, or sense of self, or sense of order that we have in our lives, that's shaken. And the world as we know it feels completely different with every single loss that we experience. The absence of those relationships can never be truly replaced. I lost a friend of mine a few months ago, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in this podcast. Even though grief changes us, we cannot allow it to define us. And so we talk today about how we face loss and grief, but we talk about it with a degree of honesty because in the midst of our sorrow, we have to find a way to continue living, to find meaning in life. And we, as we go through the pain, of losing a loved one. Marcus Aurelius, from his work, The Meditations, says, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live."
Yeah, death is inevitable. One of the problems with death in old age is that the effects on the survivors may be cumulative. Over the years, we've had many losses. Each loss depletes our emotional resources and challenges our resilience. We lose loved ones, friends, acquaintances. We may also lose jobs, identity,
Mm.
homeland, cherished dreams. As we get older, the losses seem to come in unrelenting waves. Death notices are frequent. I was talking to a friend recently as I was driving to a baby shower. When I told her where I was going, she expressed amazement. Do those still happen? She asked. I'm more used to hearing about funerals. Yes, funerals seem to be the order of the day, and it would be easy to forget that births and weddings still occur too. Loss of health is another common experience in old age. I can think immediately of at least 4 friends who recently had strokes, and I could come up with more if I were to think about it for a minute or two. One of the things that my peers have in common is that we share health concerns and resulting limitations. We don't always want to talk about it, but we are aware that some of us are living on borrowed time. We know that death is inevitable. Death is the thing that most people fear, and nobody can stop. Death interrupts our relationships. Death steals our joy.
Oh, by the way, welcome to Aging Fearlessly. This podcast primarily addresses the journey of us, baby boomers, and as we navigate through this life, we invite you to join with us and to share your experiences with us as we move forward. We are determined that we will redefine what aging means. We move through this aging process with confidence and purpose, with resilience and vitality, with optimism and adaptability. So please remember to hit the like button. As a matter of fact, do it right now. Hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, share our channel with others as we take this journey together. Please also join us on Facebook, where we continue our discussions on each topic each week. The Bible says, to everything there's a season and a time to every purpose under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die. So, even though our topic is about grief and death, we must admit that the pain that we experience after each loved one dies, the pain is simply caused because that space was filled by experiences, shared experiences with the person who is now missing. So, if we had not had positive experiences with the person who passed, then we would not miss that person. So, the first thing in talking about grieving and talking about death and talking about loss is really to look back at the lives and the experiences shared and be grateful that the person did exist, that we did share those memories, that person was a part of our lives. And some individuals, if we look back, some of the individuals who passed are individuals who, in times when we needed instructions and to navigate through difficulties of life, they were there to share and to give us instructions and give us counsel. There are some people who have passed who were there in times when we needed comfort and when we experienced pain. There were people who brought joy to our life. As we remember past experiences, we can think of laughter and times of joy that we shared with individuals. There were people in our lives who went through with us as we did our trial and error, as we made mistakes, and as we worked through the mistakes of our lives. So the emptiness that we feel is because those individuals filled a space. There's a gap in our lives. There's an emptiness. And so, yes, we experience loss, we experience the sadness, but the first thing that we should do is express gratitude for lives lived and for experiences shared. That is one of the things that I am trying to do.
I think that I agree with you. That should be our arrival point. We should get to that point. But I don't think that's the first thing that we do. It makes sense to be grateful for the relationship that we had, for the person who was in our life that filled that very important space. But that's not how we feel at first. And a lot of times we bypass how we feel to how we ought to feel. And so I believe that the first thing that we feel is just the loss. We feel the emptiness. As if things will never be the same again. Life feels surreal. And we eventually get to that place, hopefully, with healthy grieving. We hopefully get to that place. But I think that the first thing that we feel is just excruciating pain and loss and emptiness and a void that we feel can never be filled.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I changed my mind. I do agree with you that, yeah, that is the first part of the experience. I was just referring to our process here, how we go about this discussing this idea. Real emotion, yeah, we go through the pain, and it's only afterwards that we can look back now and start to feel joy again because of the experience. Yeah.
And I'm belaboring the point a little bit because I think it's so important. There's so many people who feel that there is a particular way that they ought to respond, a way that they ought to react. And some people even feel guilty about being so distressed. And I think it's important. This is something that I feel very strongly about, actually, that it's important for people to acknowledge their emotions. Emotions are not bad. They're natural and normal to human beings. And so I think it's okay for us to acknowledge our emotions. Now, what we do with those emotions, if we stay stuck, but grief is a complex process. It encompasses emotional, physical, psychological, and social reactions to loss. For older adults, the experience of grief can be particularly intense due to several factors. One is the phenomena of cumulative losses. As older adults, we often face multiple losses over a short period, including the death of friends, family members, and even pets. This cumulative effect can lead to heightened feelings of grief, and isolation and loneliness is already a factor in the lives of many older adults. And with loss of loved ones, the loneliness and the isolation can become particularly intense. Many older adults may struggle already with loneliness. The death of a close companion can intensify these feelings and significantly impact our mental health. The loss of loved ones can also affect our physical health. Grief can exacerbate health issues that already exist, and this can lead to increased stress and a decline in physical health. As older adults, we may experience changes in appetite, sleep, disturbances, and heightened confusion or forgetfulness during the process of grieving.
Yeah. As I just lost one of my very closest friends just a few months ago. And that's part of what sparked this topic for this week. He was a good friend. He had some health issues for over the years, but during his experience, he found a way to fight through his health concerns and his health issues. He searched for remedies, but not only did he search for remedies relating to his health issues, but he also created a hobby now of looking for remedies for all different kind of things, and he would regularly share these remedies, especially herbal remedies, to his friends, to his loved ones. A very good person. We spent our time from the time when I was a teenager, actually, in high school. That's when I met him. And we shared so many memories through the years. We supported each other when our parents died. We were part of our each other's wedding party. We celebrated the lives of the birth and the lives of our children, and we talked about the different struggles with our children and the joys of our children as they grew up. We navigated through difficult times together. In business, we talked about business. And so many times we just called each other, just chatted with no agenda, but having a good time each other. Now he's gone. There is no more tomorrow. There is no extension of this beautiful relationship with my friend. There is no addition. It cannot be added to. That relationship has ended. And this unique experience that we had is no longer. And there is certainly an emptiness and a sadness because of losing this very good friend of mine. And so, while I'm saddened by the loss, I cannot continue to grieve. I must move on. But it is a great loss. And like you said correctly, you don't start experiencing the joy of the relationship until you have processed the grieving, gone through the grieving process and processed the loss.
Got to process the loss before we get to the
Yeah.
gratitude.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned before, we get older. Grief hits us, it hits us harder in a way because we've had so many losses, so many different kinds of losses throughout the years. And then as our older years, we find that loss of loved ones, friends seem to come very quickly. It almost seems as if there's at least one death per month, sometimes more. We don't get a chance to recover from one before the other one happens. And that can be very debilitating. It's difficult to process each loss fully, which leads to emotional exhaustion or even paralysis in grief. We experience bereavement overload. This sometimes results in prolonged grief disorder. If symptoms persist and interfere with daily functioning, of course, at that point, persons often need to seek professional help to get them through this difficult time. Grieving has physical and cognitive effects. As mentioned before, grief can exacerbate existing health conditions. One of the things that or pain during these grieving times is social isolation and loneliness. We need each other. We need the support of other people. We need to feel a sense of belonging, even though during grieving we might sometimes feel like withdrawing, but we actually need people. Not necessarily for people to give advice and talk a lot, but just have people, just to know that there's someone you can turn to. Many elderly individuals, though, have because of their prior experience with loss, the way that they have dealt with grief in the past can actually influence how they deal with grief in the present. And some might have even developed resilience that allows them to have an easier time of dealing with grief.
Yeah. So my parents died. Just talked about my friend. My parents died, spread out, but over the last few years. And I kid you not, there is not a single day that my mind doesn't pass over one or both of them in some way. Not in a mournful way, but in some way where I remember something that they said, some instruction that was given, or there might be some behavior that I have that I can identify with one or both of my parents, and I say, oh, yeah, this is what my dad would have done or used to do, or this is what my mom would have done or used to do. There is not a day that passes where I don't have an experience where I remember them in some kind of way. And while they were alive, I could always feel the warmth, the warming embrace of their love. As a matter of fact, I could always sense a letter coming from my mother because she used to write me letters, and while she was alive, I could always either feel the sentiments of the one past and feel anticipation of the ones coming. But I could always feel their presence while they were alive because there is some experience recently past and there's some experience to come. In their later years, I also felt a different experience, and that is I felt a sense of stability and a sense of strength from knowing that they were there, even though at that point in their life they were older and they needed my help more than I needed their help. But somehow the fact that they were alive was also strengthening for me. Yeah. It gave me a certain degree of confidence just by them being alive, even though they were elderly. And I'm perfectly aware that they couldn't help me that much when they were old and sickly, but their existence created strength and stability and foundation in my life while they were alive. And now that they're gone, that sense of security and that emotional pillar that they provided, that I leaned on while they were alive, it's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. And even though the loss of loved ones can be so difficult on the person who has survived, statistics does show that the older we get, the more resilient we are in coping with the death of loved ones. We are even more resilient than those who are younger. So in us lies this ability to move forward, to be strengthened, even when a loved one die. We have this innate capacity to process the loss of a loved one and to move forward. And I think of our ability, part of our adaptability is that we are able to not only process the loss, but we are also able to re engage life, process the loss and re engage life. And that in itself is a blessing that we have and that innate capacity that we have as we get older. And it doesn't come when we're much younger.
Yeah, I feel like it works both ways because, on the one hand, as we get older and as we experience more and more losses, it's almost as if you could get tired, emotionally exhausted from just having to bounce back again and again. It depends on the particular losses that we had too. But at the same time, you're right. As we get older, we've had the experience and we know that we experienced it and we felt as if we weren't going to be able to survive, but we did survive. So we have that experience to build on to give us strength and resilience to go through the experience again. So it works both ways.
Yeah. So, yeah, I do agree. And I think that this is kind of where my experience is with my parents now is that I don't feel so much the sadness of the loss anymore. I feel that I'm tapping into the identity that they created in me. I feel that I'm tapping into that confidence that they planted in me through their love. I feel that I'm tapping into the dignity that my parents had, even though growing up being poor. So even though I still feel sad about losing them, I am gaining a deeper understanding of what it is to be human, what it is to love and to be loved. These experiences are becoming more real and more meaningful to me as I get older. So yes, I'm processing the fact that my parents are gone, but in dealing with the loss, I am really using and finding energy to move forward, to identify and to define my purpose and to build my resilience. So, yeah.
And isn't that part of healing process though? Whether we're older or younger, really, we're going to survive. We have to go through that process. First of all, it's the first part is just raw pain, just raw pain. And then over time, as we process the loss and as we find ways of coping and ways of moving forward, then we start to experience what you're talking about, the sense of what did they leave behind, their legacy that they left behind that now makes me who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a healthy thing. So, as I talk about the legacy that our parents leave behind, so I lost my father some 40 something years ago. I think 47 years, and no, 46 years ago. And when I lost my father, it was a sudden loss. So I had no time to prepare, no time to think about it and philosophize and all this kind of thing. It just happened all of a sudden. And like I said, it was raw pain. I still have my mom, but I recently experienced something that we call anticipatory grieving. About 4 months ago, my mother became very sick. Physicians did not expect her to live. They recommended discharge to home on hospice care. One of the hospice nurses, apparently concerned about my seemingly buoyant, optimistic spirit, took me aside and told me plainly that my mother would die within a few weeks. She said it won't be years, we're talking months or even weeks. I cried a lot over the next few weeks. I would get lost in reliving memories and pondering things about my mother's life. Then I would become overwhelmed with sadness, and then I'd cry uncontrollably. I became very businesslike, handling everything that needed to be handled with competence and precision. Life felt surreal because I would cry and then I would become efficient and businesslike, and then I'd fall apart again as I kept trying to imagine a world without my mother in it. And it's like you said, they don't have to be right there with you. Just knowing that they exist somewhere is comforting. It gives you a sense of stability and continuity. But it took me a long time to get used to the idea that my father was nowhere in particular. He just had ceased to exist. And I couldn't quite come to terms with that. In this anticipatory grief, I found myself wondering what this would be like. I walked on the road so many times to dealing with the actual event in my mind, in a way, kind of setting myself up to be able to deal with it in reality. Then my mother made a sudden turn and started doing quite well. She signed out of hospice, and we all did our best to return to life almost as usual. Then a few weeks later, my mother took another turn and became dependent again, but not as sick as she had been. I feel as if I've been on a wild emotional roller coaster ride. Now my emotions seem frozen in time, kind of very careful, wary about moving in any direction because of the fickle nature of her condition. Now I just take one day at a time, but always aware that one day I will still have to walk that dreaded road without reprieve this time.
Yeah. All right. We hope that you found some benefit in this episode of Aging Fearlessly. I can't say I hope you enjoyed it because it's not a topic to enjoy, but we hope that we provided through our experience and through the information that we brought, we hope that you found some benefit and some tools that will help you in your particular journey. Please again, like this episode and share it with your friends, subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you in the next time. Closing, I'd like to say on this topic that we don't get over our losses, but we rebuild our lives around them. Getting older doesn't mean that we have lost the capacity to find joy and fulfillment. It doesn't mean that all of this has ended, but rather, aging fearlessly means that we learn to carry our love and our grief side by side, finding meaning in this beautiful ongoing story of our lives.
Farewell until next time.
Take care.